What if the Taylor Swift and Joe Alwyn story everyone thought they understood suddenly had one more chapter? For years, their relationship was defined by privacy. They rarely discussed each other publicly, avoided turning their romance into a constant media spectacle, and kept much of their life together, away from cameras. Joe Alwyn later explained that keeping their relationship private was something they had mutually agreed on. That is exactly why the latest online claims about supposedly leaked hotel footage are causing such a massive reaction. But here's the part nobody should rush past. Is there actually authentic footage showing Taylor and Joe inside a private hotel setting? Or has the internet taken an old image, misleading clip, or completely unrelated footage and transformed it into a sensational story? Because when two people deliberately protect their privacy, even the smallest piece of alleged exclusive material can trigger an explosion of speculation. And this story gets even more intriguing when you look at what Taylor and Joe's relationship was actually like behind the headlines. Was there something the public never understood about their private life? Why were they so determined to keep certain moments away from cameras? And what is the truth behind the footage now being discussed online? By the end, you'll see why this alleged leak is attracting so much attention, and why the biggest surprise may not be what the footage supposedly shows, but whether the footage is even what people claim it is. Taylor Swift and Joe Alwyn built one of the most closely watched relationships in entertainment, while somehow revealing remarkably little about their private life. For more than 6 years, the two deliberately avoided turning their romance into a public spectacle, and that privacy became one of the defining characteristics of their relationship. Swift herself explained that she and Alwyn had decided together that they wanted the relationship to remain private. That history is exactly why claims about supposedly private hotel footage are attracting so much attention. The idea of seeing something that was allegedly never intended for public consumption immediately creates curiosity. Fans want to know what could possibly be contained in footage involving two celebrities who spent years protecting their personal lives from cameras. But there's a crucial problem. The current reliable reporting available for this story does not establish that authentic private hotel footage of Taylor Swift and Joe Alwyn has been leaked. That doesn't mean the online conversation isn't real. It means the claim and the evidence are two different things. And that distinction is especially important with Taylor and Joe, because their entire relationship was built around controlling what the public could see. Unlike some celebrity couples who regularly appeared together, Swift and Alwyn rarely gave the world obvious access to their relationship. They avoided constant social media updates, rarely discussed one another in interviews, and generally refused to turn their romance into entertainment for the public. Vogue described their approach as an unusually strong commitment to privacy, while Alwyn repeatedly emphasized that he preferred discussing his professional work rather than his relationship. That made every genuine glimpse of them unusually valuable to fans. A photograph became a major event. A public appearance became something fans analyzed. A tiny detail in a song became a subject of intense speculation, and footage became even more powerful. There was already a small amount of authentic personal footage connected to their relationship. For example, Swift's documentary Miss Americana included moments from her private life, including footage involving Alwyn. The documentary showed a glimpse of their relationship without turning it into a full public display. That's important because it demonstrates something about the couple's approach. They weren't completely invisible, they simply controlled what they allowed people to see. That distinction is at the heart of the current controversy. When someone claims that previously private hotel footage has suddenly appeared, the first question shouldn't be, what shocking secret does it reveal? The first question should be, where did the footage come from? Who originally recorded it? When was it supposedly recorded? How was it obtained? Has its authenticity been independently established? And does the footage actually show Taylor and Joe? Or is someone simply attaching their names to old or unrelated material? Those questions may not sound as exciting as the headline, But they are the questions that determine whether a viral story is actually worth believing. The reason the alleged footage has such a strong emotional impact is obvious. Taylor and Joe's relationship was intensely private. They were together for years without constantly documenting their lives for fans. They were photographed occasionally, but they rarely appeared to be performing their relationship for the cameras. That created an unusual situation where fans knew they were together, knew they were serious, and knew they shared parts of their lives, but still knew remarkably little about what their day-to-day relationship looked like. That mystery became part of the fascination. Swift even discussed the importance of having a private relationship in Miss Americana. She described falling for someone with a grounded, normal life, and explained that the two of them wanted their relationship to remain private. Joe Alwyn expressed a similar philosophy. In interviews, he questioned why the public expected celebrities to constantly reveal what they were doing, and argued that private life should remain private. His comments made it clear that avoiding constant exposure wasn't an accident, it was a deliberate boundary. And that makes the idea of a hotel recording particularly provocative. A hotel is exactly the kind of environment where celebrities might expect privacy. So if genuine footage from such a location ever surfaced without the subject's consent, the story wouldn't simply be about Taylor Swift and Joe Alwyn. It would also raise serious questions about privacy, provenance, and how the footage was obtained. But again, there is currently no reliable evidence in the sources reviewed here establishing that such a leak has actually occurred. What is documented is that old or previously unseen material involving Swift and Alwyn has circulated before. In 2023, for example, online videos were promoted as unseen footage of the couple before their breakup. That shows how quickly the phrase unseen footage can generate attention whenever these two names appear together. And that's exactly why viewers should be cautious. A clip being labeled private, exclusive, or leaked doesn't automatically make it authentic. Sometimes the most important detail is hidden in the description. Was the footage actually new? Was it ever private? Was it originally recorded by one of them? Was it simply old footage that hadn't been widely circulated? Or was the title created to make ordinary material sound explosive? Those possibilities can look almost identical to someone scrolling through social media. That's why the story surrounding this alleged footage needs to be examined piece by piece. Taylor and Joe were famously private. Their relationship lasted roughly 6 years. They eventually separated in 2023. And even after the breakup, Alwyn continued to speak carefully about the relationship, rather than turning it into a public spectacle. That history makes any alleged private footage incredibly clickable. But it also makes verification more important. Because if the footage isn't authentic, then the entire story changes. Instead of revealing a hidden side of Taylor and Joe's relationship, it becomes another example of how the internet can turn celebrity privacy into viral speculation. And that possibility may be the biggest twist of all, because everyone is asking what the footage supposedly shows. Very few people are asking the more fundamental question: is there actually legitimate footage to see? Until that question is answered, everything else remains speculation. And that is where the story gets even more interesting, because the real mystery isn't necessarily what Taylor and Joe were doing inside some supposedly secret hotel room. The real mystery may be how this particular footage became associated with them in the first place. The phrase private hotel footage sounds explosive, because Taylor Swift and Joe Alwyn spent years doing almost the exact opposite of what celebrity culture normally demands. They didn't constantly document their relationship. They didn't build their public image around couple appearances. They didn't regularly give fans intimate updates, and they didn't appear interested in turning their private life into entertainment. In fact, Alwyn later explained that keeping the relationship private was a mutual decision between the two of them. That history makes any supposed footage involving them immediately fascinating. But it also creates a major problem for anyone trying to understand the current online claims. If a clip suddenly appears with a sensational caption claiming it shows Taylor and Joe inside a private hotel, that caption alone doesn't establish what viewers are actually looking at. The footage could be old. It could be publicly recorded footage from a hotel or event. It could be a completely unrelated clip. It could be edited. Or it could simply be material that was previously available somewhere but is now being presented as newly leaked. Those possibilities matter because celebrity footage is often separated from its original context once it starts circulating. A video gets reposted. The original source disappears. A dramatic title is added. Someone describes it as never before seen. Another account reposts it as leaked. And suddenly thousands of people believe they are watching a secret recording, but the original context may tell a completely different story. That is particularly relevant with Taylor and Joe. There are authentic photographs and public sightings of the couple from throughout their relationship. Getty Images, for example, has archived numerous legitimate images of them appearing together at public events and locations. There were also rare public outings. People documented the pair during dates in London, for example, while other photographs captured them at events and restaurants. So someone could easily take genuine material involving the couple and give it a more sensational description than the original circumstances justify. That's why the word private needs to be examined carefully. Private does not necessarily mean secretly recorded. It can simply mean that something was not widely circulated. There is a huge difference between those two things. Imagine a photograph taken by paparazzi outside a hotel. The couple may have wanted privacy, but the photograph itself isn't necessarily a secret recording. Now imagine a professionally filmed event at a hotel. Again, the location might be private, but the footage isn't automatically illicit or secretly obtained. Then there's the most extreme version, a hidden camera or unauthorized recording inside a genuinely private space. That would be an entirely different situation. And without reliable evidence establishing the source, nobody should assume which category the alleged material belongs to. This is why the story needs to be approached from the evidence outward, not from the headline backward. The headline says something shocking happened. The evidence needs to tell us whether it actually did. And right now, the public record gives us something much more interesting than a confirmed leak. It gives us a documented history of extraordinary privacy. Vogue described Swift and Alwyn's relationship as unusually private compared with the highly public relationships common in celebrity culture. That privacy wasn't accidental. It became part of how they navigated fame. For Swift, who has spent much of her career under intense public scrutiny, maintaining some part of life away from cameras was clearly important. For Alwyn, the same principle appeared to matter. That is why their relationship became a mystery for fans. People knew they were together. They knew the relationship lasted years. They knew they worked together creatively, but they didn't have constant access to their personal lives. And that absence created space for speculation. Fans began analyzing lyrics. They studied public appearances. They searched for tiny references. They tried to understand which songs might have been inspired by which moments. The less the couple revealed directly, the more people tried to reconstruct indirectly. That's the environment in which a supposed leaked hotel video can become incredibly powerful. It appears to promise something fans almost never received from the couple: direct access. But that's exactly why skepticism is necessary. A video doesn't become authentic because it satisfies what viewers want to see. The desire for an exclusive glimpse can make people lower their standards for evidence. And once a clip is emotionally compelling, viewers may stop asking where it came from. That is the trap. The real story may not be hidden inside the footage at all. It may be hidden in the circumstances surrounding its circulation. Who posted it first? What date did they claim? Was there an original upload? Was the location identifiable? Were Taylor and Joe actually together during the period the footage supposedly came from? Does the visual material match known photographs or public appearances? And perhaps most importantly, has any credible publication independently authenticated it? Those questions can turn a sensational story into a much more revealing investigation. Because sometimes, the biggest discovery is that the leak isn't new. It's simply old material, wearing a new headline. And there is another reason this matters. Taylor and Joe's relationship ended in 2023, after more than 6 years together. Their breakup itself became major entertainment news precisely because so little of the relationship had been publicly documented. Even after the breakup, Alwyn continued emphasizing the difficulty of having such a personal relationship suddenly become public discussion. That makes the idea of an alleged private recording even more sensitive. But sensitivity shouldn't be confused with authenticity. A story can be incredibly clickable and still lack reliable evidence. And that may be the central lesson viewers should take from this entire controversy. Don't ask only, what does the footage show? Ask, what proves this footage is what the headline says it is? Those are completely different questions. If authentic evidence eventually emerges, then the story can be reassessed. If a credible source identifies the footage and establishes its origin, that changes the conversation. But until then, the responsible approach is to treat the supposed leak as an online claim rather than an established event. And that leaves us with an even bigger mystery. If this isn't confirmed private hotel footage, why did people become convinced that it was? Because that question takes us beyond Taylor and Joe themselves and into the fascinating world of viral celebrity rumors, recycled footage, and the internet's obsession with discovering what famous couples supposedly do when nobody is watching. For years, the biggest mystery surrounding Taylor Swift and Joe Alwyn wasn't what they were doing in public. It was what they were doing when the cameras weren't there. That curiosity became almost impossible to escape because the couple made privacy part of their relationship from the beginning. Swift and Alwyn rarely appeared together, avoided turning their romance into social media content, and repeatedly declined to provide the public with intimate details. Swift later explained that they had decided together that they wanted their relationship to remain private. That one decision created an unusual dynamic. The less they revealed, the more people wanted to know. A normal photograph became something fans studied. A public sighting became a major entertainment story. A lyric became a potential clue. And a few seconds of genuine personal footage could become more fascinating than an entire celebrity interview. That is exactly why claims about supposedly private hotel footage are so powerful. They appear to promise the one thing Taylor and Joe rarely offered: an unfiltered look at their private world. But there is another side to this story. The public already has a few genuine glimpses into their relationship, and those glimpses actually show just how carefully the couple controlled their boundaries. One of the most interesting examples came from Miss Americana. The documentary wasn't designed to become a relationship documentary about Taylor and Joe. In fact, director Lana Wilson later explained that she deliberately didn't want to focus on Swift's relationship because she felt that aspect of her life had already been subjected to enough public scrutiny. Yet the documentary still contained small moments that became incredibly meaningful to fans. There was footage of Swift backstage after a performance, where she ran toward Alwyn. There were glimpses of their personal environment. There was also footage of Swift performing music privately, including material believed to have been recorded by Alwyn. Those moments were brief, but because they were authentic and rare, they became enormously important to fans trying to understand the couple. And that tells us something fascinating. People didn't necessarily need an hour of Taylor and Joe together. They wanted a genuine moment, a small glimpse, something that didn't feel staged. That is why a supposed hotel recording would immediately generate such a huge reaction. It would appear to go beyond the carefully controlled public glimpses and expose something that the couple intentionally kept away from cameras. But that is precisely where the story needs caution. There is currently no reliable evidence establishing that authentic private hotel footage of Taylor Swift and Joe Alwyn has been leaked. The current reporting continues to emphasize their long-standing commitment to privacy, rather than documenting a confirmed hotel video leak. So instead of treating the alleged footage as a proven event, it is more useful to ask why the claim feels so believable to some people. The answer is their history. For 6 years, fans were trained to expect very little direct access. Swift and Alwyn didn't behave like a celebrity couple constantly searching for attention. They didn't need public displays to prove they were together. They built their relationship around a boundary between their professional lives and their personal lives. Alwyn explained that he found the public's intense interest in their relationship difficult to understand. He also described privacy as a response to an increasingly intrusive culture in which people can take information even when celebrities choose not to give it. Swift expressed a similar philosophy. She described how being in a relationship with someone who had a grounded life made her want parts of her existence to feel more normal and less like a storyline for tabloids. That makes the alleged hotel footage almost the perfect viral story. It takes the couple's greatest mystery, their privacy, and turns it into the headline. But that doesn't make the footage authentic. It only explains why people are interested. And there is another reason these claims can spread so quickly. The internet has a huge appetite for unseen celebrity material. The words themselves are powerful. Unseen, exclusive, leaked, private, never before released. Each word suggests that the viewer is about to see something that other people weren't supposed to see. Once Taylor Swift's name is added, the potential audience becomes enormous. Millions of people already know the broad outline of her relationship with Alwyn. They know the couple was together for years. They know they collaborated creatively. They know their relationship inspired enormous fan speculation. And they know the breakup became a major story precisely because so little of their private life had been publicly documented. That combination creates the perfect environment for rumor. People fill the gaps. They imagine what might have happened. They interpret tiny details. And eventually, a claim about unseen footage can feel almost believable simply because it fits the story people already want to understand. But there is a problem with that logic. A believable story isn't necessarily a factual story. The only way to establish what footage actually is would be to trace its origin. Where did it first appear? Who recorded it? What date was it supposedly captured? What location is shown? Is the footage continuous? Has it been altered? Are there other versions? Has a credible source authenticated it? Those questions matter far more than the emotional reaction created by the headline. And there is an even bigger issue. If footage truly came from inside a private hotel room or another private space without the subject's consent, that would raise serious privacy concerns. That is not something that should simply be treated as celebrity gossip. It would be a question of how the material was obtained and whether distributing it was appropriate. That's another reason not to casually circulate alleged private footage, simply because it has a sensational caption. The story can be discussed without pretending the footage is genuine, and there is plenty to discuss. Taylor and Joe's relationship remains one of the most fascinating examples of celebrity privacy in the modern era. Their approach was so unusual that even years later, fans continue to examine the tiny pieces of information they left behind. Their music collaborations became clues. Their rare appearances became events. Their silence became a story itself. Even rumors of engagement repeatedly became headlines, despite Alwyn refusing to confirm or deny them. That pattern shows how much attention was created simply by withholding information. And it explains why a supposed private video can become so explosive. People aren't only curious about the footage, they're curious about the missing years. They want to know what the relationship was really like, away from cameras. They want to know whether the public version matched the private reality. They want to know what Taylor and Joe were like when they weren't being watched. But those questions don't give us permission to invent answers, and they certainly don't authenticate a clip. The most responsible, and arguably most interesting, approach is to examine what is actually known. We know they protected their privacy. We know they occasionally allowed tiny glimpses into their personal world. We know they worked together creatively. We know they eventually separated after more than 6 years. And we know Alwyn later emphasized that their decision to keep private details private was mutual, and that he saw no reason to change that approach after the breakup. What we do not have from the current reliable sources is confirmation of the supposed hotel footage leak. And that missing piece changes the entire story. Because if the footage is eventually authenticated, the conversation will become much more serious. But if it isn't, then the real story may be about how easily a celebrity rumor can transform into an apparent scandal simply because it satisfies the public's curiosity. And that brings us to the biggest question yet. If Taylor and Joe spent years deliberately keeping their private life away from cameras, why are people suddenly convinced that an intimate piece of that private world has appeared online? Who started the claim? Where did the alleged footage come from? And what exactly are viewers being shown? Because those questions may reveal more than the supposed footage ever could. The Taylor Swift and Joe Alwyn story became even more fascinating after their relationship ended, because the same privacy that protected them while they were together suddenly became one of the biggest sources of public curiosity. For years, fans had almost no direct access to their relationship. There were occasional photographs, rare public appearances, creative collaborations, and a handful of carefully controlled glimpses. But there was never a constant stream of intimate content documenting their lives together. Then they broke up. And suddenly, people wanted to know everything. What happened? When did things begin changing? Were there warning signs? Did their private life look different from the public image? And most importantly, what did Taylor and Joe actually experience during those 6 years that the public never saw? Those questions created an enormous information gap. And whenever there is a gap in information surrounding a major celebrity, speculation tends to rush in to fill it. That's exactly why the alleged hotel footage is so clickable. It appears to promise access to a part of Taylor and Joe's relationship that fans were never supposed to see. But there is still a major problem. The available reliable reporting does not establish that authentic private hotel footage involving the former couple has actually been leaked. That means the breakup itself is important context, but it should not be used as proof that the alleged footage exists. What the breakup does explain is why interest in their private relationship became even stronger. During the relationship, there was at least an assumption that the couple might continue together privately for years. After the breakup, every old photograph suddenly became historical evidence. Every lyric became something fans wanted to reinterpret. Every interview received new attention. And every previously unseen image or video became potentially valuable. The public wanted answers that neither person appeared particularly interested in providing. Joe Alwyn maintained a careful distance from the conversation. Taylor continued focusing on her music and career. Neither turned the breakup into a detailed public post-mortem. That silence frustrated some fans, but it also remained consistent with the way the relationship had been handled from the beginning. Privacy had been the rule. The breakup didn't automatically cancel that rule, and Joe later made it clear that the decision to keep their relationship private had been mutual. That statement is significant because it challenges the assumption that the couple was simply hiding something from the public. They may have simply wanted a normal part of life that didn't belong to everyone else. For Taylor, that desire was understandable. Her career has placed enormous attention on her personal life for years. Relationships have become headlines. Breakups have inspired theories. Songs have been analyzed for clues. Photographs have been scrutinized. Even small comments can become international news. In that environment, keeping a relationship private can become a form of protection. For Joe, who came from a very different professional world, the same boundary may have been equally important. He was an actor and songwriter, but he didn't appear interested in becoming a permanent character inside Taylor Swift's celebrity narrative. That difference may have helped the relationship survive for as long as it did. But it also made the breakup more mysterious. The less people knew, the more they wanted explanations. And when explanations didn't come, speculation filled the space. That's how narratives about secret arguments, hidden problems, private disagreements, and supposed behind-the-scenes incidents began appearing. Some were based on clues, some were based on interpretation, some were simply invented by people looking for a story. And that's why the alleged hotel footage should be viewed carefully. A dramatic claim can easily become attached to a real relationship, simply because the relationship itself contains enough mystery to make the claim sound believable. Taylor and Joe really were together. They really did spend years avoiding publicity. They really did have private moments that the public never saw. But that doesn't mean every piece of footage claiming to reveal those moments is authentic. Those are separate questions, and separating them is essential. The breakup also created another phenomenon: retrospective storytelling. Once a famous relationship ends, people often go back and reinterpret everything that happened before. A photograph that once looked romantic can suddenly be viewed as evidence of distance. A lyric that seemed unrelated can suddenly be connected to the breakup. An interview can be replayed, looking for clues that weren't obvious at the time. This can create the illusion that the ending was always visible. But relationships are complicated. People change. Circumstances change. Priorities change. Two people can care about each other deeply and still eventually decide that the relationship no longer works. The public doesn't need to know every private reason, and the absence of those details doesn't automatically indicate a scandal. That's an important point when discussing Taylor and Joe. There is a temptation to assume that because their breakup was private, something dramatic must have happened. But privacy isn't evidence of drama. Sometimes privacy is simply privacy. The same principle applies to the supposed hotel footage. If someone says a secret video reveals what really happened between Taylor and Joe, the question should immediately become, what is the source? Not, what shocking thing did they supposedly do? Not, what secret does this reveal? But, where did this come from? Without that answer, the story remains incomplete. And that may be why the alleged footage continues to generate curiosity. People want closure. They want a definitive explanation for a relationship that lasted more than 6 years and ended without a detailed public account. But celebrities don't owe the public that explanation. Taylor and Joe chose privacy while they were together. They have every right to maintain boundaries afterward. That doesn't stop people from being curious. But curiosity should not become an excuse to treat unsupported claims as established facts. And the irony is that the couple's privacy may actually be the reason the rumor is so powerful. If fans had years of intimate footage, private interviews, and behind-the-scenes recordings, one more clip wouldn't mean much. But because there is so little genuine material, anything labeled private immediately feels important. That's the psychology behind the story. Scarcity creates value. Mystery creates curiosity. And celebrity names create attention. Combine all three, and even an unsupported claim can spread extremely quickly. But the same thing that makes the claim fascinating also makes verification essential. Because if the footage is real, viewers deserve to know its legitimate source and context. If it isn't real, viewers deserve to know that too. And if nobody can establish where it came from, the safest conclusion is that the claim remains unconfirmed. That doesn't mean the Taylor Swift and Joe Alwyn story is over. Far from it. Their relationship remains one of the most closely examined chapters of Swift's personal history. Their creative connection continues to interest fans. Their breakup continues to generate questions. And their extraordinary privacy ensures that people will keep wondering what happened behind the scenes. But there is a difference between wondering and knowing. And that difference is exactly what makes the next part of this story so important. Because once the internet starts treating an alleged private recording as a revelation, the next question becomes unavoidable. What happens when people finally look beyond the headline and start examining where the footage actually came from? That may be where the supposed leak either becomes a legitimate story or falls apart completely. At this point, the story has reached the part where the excitement of the headline has to give way to a much more important question. What can actually be established? The claim is dramatic. Taylor Swift and Joe Alwyn, a private hotel, supposedly leaked footage, and a reaction that suggests the material could reveal something the public never knew. That combination is almost guaranteed to attract attention, but the more sensational the claim becomes, the more important the source becomes. And right now, that is where the biggest gap remains. The reliable material available for this story documents Taylor and Joe's extraordinary commitment to privacy. It documents their relationship, their creative connection, their eventual breakup, and their reluctance to discuss intimate details publicly. What it does not establish is that authentic private hotel footage has been leaked. That doesn't automatically prove that every clip circulating online is fake. It means something simpler. The claim has not been established by the reliable sources available here. And that difference matters. Because once an alleged celebrity leak becomes viral, the public often starts discussing the contents before anyone has established the origin. That's backwards. The first question should always be provenance. Where did it come from? Who recorded it? When? Under what circumstances? Was it originally public? Was it edited? Was the person who posted it the original source? Has an independent publication authenticated it? Without those answers, a clip can be almost impossible to evaluate responsibly. And Taylor and Joe's history makes that problem even more significant. Their relationship was unusually private. Joe explicitly discussed their shared decision to keep the relationship private, explaining that they had agreed together not to make intimate details public. That means the absence of footage isn't suspicious. It is consistent with the way they chose to live. For years, fans had to rely on occasional public photographs and small glimpses rather than constant documentation. That scarcity created enormous curiosity, and curiosity can make people vulnerable to sensational claims. If someone says, "Here's a private video of Taylor and Joe that nobody was supposed to see," the claim immediately fills an information gap. People suddenly feel like they're receiving access to something hidden. That's a powerful psychological effect. But the feeling of access isn't evidence. A convincing title isn't evidence. A viral repost isn't evidence. And thousands of comments aren't evidence. Only reliable information can establish what a piece of footage actually is. That's why this story shouldn't be reduced to a simple question of whether fans believe the clip. The better question is whether the clip can withstand scrutiny. Consider the possibilities. Maybe the footage is legitimate but old. Maybe it was filmed somewhere public but later described as private. Maybe it was authentic footage that was already available but resurfaced with a new title. Maybe it has been edited. Maybe Taylor or Joe aren't even the people shown. Or maybe there is no genuine footage behind the viral claim at all. Every one of those possibilities would produce a completely different story. And that's why the next stage of the conversation should focus on verification rather than imagination. The same principle applies to the supposed reaction. The headline suggests that the footage contains something nobody expected. But what exactly? A private conversation? A romantic moment? A disagreement? A glimpse into their relationship? Or simply an ordinary moment that becomes shocking because viewers were never used to seeing them together? Without authentic context, even the meaning of a clip can be misrepresented. A few seconds can be made to tell an entirely different story when separated from what happened before and after. That's particularly important with celebrity relationships. People already have preconceived ideas. Fans may want the relationship to have been deeply romantic. Critics may want evidence that something went wrong. Others may simply be curious. Those expectations can influence how the same footage is interpreted. And that is why the story needs to remain grounded. Taylor and Joe were together for years. They collaborated privately and professionally. They protected their personal lives. They eventually separated. Those are the foundations. Everything beyond that needs evidence. The breakup itself created another wave of speculation because the couple never provided a detailed public explanation. But again, silence doesn't prove scandal. A private breakup doesn't prove betrayal. A lack of photographs doesn't prove hidden conflict. And an alleged hotel video doesn't become authentic simply because it appears to explain something people already want explained. That's one of the biggest traps in celebrity storytelling. People often work backward. They start with a theory, then they search for something that appears to support it. Instead, the process should work forward. Start with the evidence, determine what it shows, then decide what conclusions are justified. That approach may produce a less explosive story, but it produces a stronger one, and in this case, the strongest conclusion is surprisingly simple. Taylor Swift and Joe Alwyn deliberately kept their relationship private. That privacy was mutual. Their breakup was also largely handled privately. And despite the online claims surrounding supposed hotel footage, the reliable sources available for this story do not establish that authentic private hotel footage has been leaked. That doesn't eliminate the possibility that additional information could emerge later. If credible evidence appears, the story can change. If an original source is identified, that changes the conversation. If independent reporting authenticates footage, viewers can reassess it. But until then, treating an alleged leak as confirmed would go beyond what the evidence supports. And there is actually something fascinating about that uncertainty. It tells us how powerful Taylor Swift's privacy has become as a part of her celebrity mythology. The less she reveals, the more people want to know. The more boundaries she creates, the more valuable supposed glimpses become. And the longer she refuses to explain every private detail, the more room there is for the internet to construct its own versions of the story. That doesn't mean she should reveal more. Quite the opposite. It demonstrates why those boundaries matter. A celebrity can choose what belongs to the public and what doesn't. And if a genuinely private recording ever emerges without consent, the important issue shouldn't be whether the footage is entertaining. The important issue should be how it was obtained and whether sharing it respects the people involved. That is a very different conversation from ordinary celebrity gossip. And it is one worth remembering whenever a supposedly explosive private video appears online. So the real twist in this story may not be that Taylor and Joe secretly did something shocking. It may be that the public has once again been given a story that sounds more certain than the available evidence actually allows. And that leads directly to the final question. If the alleged footage is eventually authenticated, what could it genuinely tell us about Taylor and Joe? And if it isn't, why did so many people believe the claim in the first place? Because those answers could reveal something far more interesting than one supposed hotel video. They could reveal how celebrity privacy, fan curiosity, and viral misinformation collide in the age of instant information. At this point, the Taylor Swift and Joe Alwyn story reaches its most important question. What happens if credible evidence finally emerges? Because the biggest mystery surrounding the alleged hotel footage isn't what the internet claims it shows. It's whether the material can actually be traced to a legitimate source. For Taylor and Joe, that question matters more than almost anything else. Their relationship was built around privacy. They mutually chose not to make intimate details public, and Joe later explained that he saw no reason to change that approach simply because the relationship had ended. That makes any supposed private recording especially sensitive. But it also means the standard for believing a claim should be extremely high. If a genuine recording suddenly appeared, the first step would be determining its origin. Who recorded it? When was it recorded? Where? Was it obtained legally? Has the footage been edited? And can independent sources confirm that Taylor and Joe are actually the people shown? Those questions may sound less exciting than the headline, but they are what separate a real development from another viral rumor. And this is where the story could go in several completely different directions. The first possibility is that credible evidence eventually authenticates the footage. If that happens, the story changes dramatically. The focus would no longer be a vague internet claim. It would become a documented piece of material requiring context. Viewers would then need to understand exactly what the footage shows, when it was recorded, and whether the surrounding circumstances have been accurately described. Even then, a short recording wouldn't necessarily explain an entire relationship. One private moment cannot automatically reveal what Taylor and Joe's relationship was like over 6 years. It couldn't tell viewers everything that happened before or after. It couldn't provide a complete explanation for their breakup. And it couldn't magically turn speculation into certainty about their personal lives. It would simply be one piece of evidence. That's important because celebrity audiences often treat a newly discovered clip as if it explains everything. Real life is rarely that simple. The second possibility is that the footage turns out to be legitimate, but dramatically misrepresented. Maybe it was recorded publicly. Maybe it was already available. Maybe the people in it aren't doing anything particularly surprising. Maybe the leaked label was added later to create attention. This possibility is extremely important because a video can be real while the story surrounding it is false. The footage itself could be authentic, the caption could still be misleading, and that is exactly why provenance and context matter. The third possibility is that the material cannot be authenticated at all. If the original source disappears, the date cannot be established, the footage is heavily edited, or there is no credible confirmation of the identities involved, then viewers have very little reason to treat the claim as established. That doesn't necessarily prove the footage is fake. It simply means there isn't enough reliable information to make a confident conclusion, and that may ultimately be where this story remains. A viral claim without enough evidence to resolve it. For fans, that uncertainty can be frustrating. People want answers. They want to know what really happened between Taylor and Joe. They want to understand why the relationship ended. They want to know what their private life was really like. But Taylor and Joe have never suggested that the public is entitled to every answer. In fact, their entire relationship demonstrated the opposite. They deliberately kept boundaries. They chose what to share. They refused to turn every private moment into public entertainment. That decision deserves to be understood, rather than treated as suspicious. Because celebrity culture can create a strange expectation. Once someone becomes famous, people begin feeling entitled to access. They want photographs. They want interviews. They want private stories. They want relationship details. And when celebrities refuse, some audiences interpret the silence as evidence that there must be something hidden. But privacy doesn't mean there is a secret scandal. Sometimes, it simply means someone wants part of their life to remain theirs. That principle becomes especially important when discussing alleged private footage. If the material genuinely came from a private setting without permission, the ethical question isn't simply whether fans want to watch it, it's whether distributing it respects the people involved. That's a completely different standard from ordinary paparazzi photography, and it is why viewers should be cautious about sharing supposed private material whose origins are unclear. The more viral a clip becomes, the harder it can be to correct misinformation afterward. A false caption can reach millions. A misleading interpretation can be repeated thousands of times. And eventually, people may remember the claim even after its original source has disappeared. That's why this story is bigger than Taylor and Joe. It reflects a much broader problem in celebrity culture. The internet has created an enormous market for exclusive material. People want to be first. They want to discover something nobody else has seen. They want to feel like they have access behind the curtain. That desire creates incentives for sensational headlines, and Taylor Swift is perhaps one of the biggest names in the world for generating that kind of attention. Her private life has been examined for years. Her relationships have inspired songs, theories, documentaries, headlines, and endless fan analysis. Joe Alwyn was different. He didn't seek the same level of public exposure. That contrast made their relationship even more fascinating. Taylor's fame was enormous. Joe's public profile was comparatively restrained. Together, they created a relationship that existed largely outside the normal celebrity spotlight. And when that relationship ended, the mystery remained. That's why the internet continues searching for answers. But there is an important lesson here. The absence of information isn't permission to invent information. A blank space isn't evidence. A rumor isn't a recording. A recording isn't automatically proof of the caption attached to it. And a viral post isn't automatically a reliable source. The truth has to be established step by step. That is what should happen if this alleged footage ever becomes a legitimate story. Start with the source. Establish the date. Establish the location. Confirm the identities. Examine the original file. Determine whether it has been edited. Then consider what it actually shows. Only after those steps can anyone responsibly discuss what the footage might mean. And if those steps never happen, then the claim should remain exactly what it is: an unconfirmed online allegation. That may not satisfy everyone, but it is far better than manufacturing certainty. For Taylor and Joe, the most important fact remains unchanged. They chose privacy. They maintained that boundary for years. And even after the relationship ended, neither turned their private life into a public spectacle. So perhaps the biggest surprise isn't some shocking hotel moment. Perhaps the biggest surprise is how much people still want access to a relationship that both individuals deliberately kept away from the cameras. And that brings us to the final takeaway. If genuine evidence emerges, examine it. If credible reporting confirms the story, update the narrative. If the footage is debunked, don't keep repeating it. And if nothing can establish the claim, recognize that the mystery may remain a mystery. Because when it comes to Taylor Swift and Joe Alwyn, the one thing we can say with confidence is that privacy was never an accident. It was a choice, and until credible evidence proves otherwise, that is the reality viewers should keep in mind when they see another dramatic headline promising a secret glimpse into their past. The internet may keep asking what happened behind closed doors, but the real question is much simpler. Do we actually have evidence, or do we simply have another story that became bigger than the facts? So what do you think about the Taylor Swift and Joe Alwyn hotel footage story? Is there genuinely something new that deserves attention, or has the internet taken an unconfirmed claim and turned it into another massive celebrity mystery? One thing is important. Taylor and Joe deliberately kept their relationship private, and the available reliable information does not establish that authentic private hotel footage has been leaked. But that doesn't make the story any less fascinating, because the bigger question remains: why are people so determined to uncover the private moments Taylor and Joe chose not to share? Do you think this alleged footage will eventually be proven authentic, or will the entire story collapse once its source is examined? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next major celebrity story. Because when it comes to Taylor Swift, one thing is certain: the internet will keep searching for the story behind the story. And if credible new information ever emerges, we'll be watching. What do you think? Real revelation or viral rumor?